Hello Year 7, it's Mr. Turner here again. So last week we looked at Shakespeare and Sonnet 130. This week we're going to look at someone called Percy Bysshe Shelley. And we're looking at this person because he created a lot of romantic poetry, and the poem we're going to look at today is Ozymandias. So Ozymandias is quite an important poem to you because in Year 11 it could possibly come up in your exam from your Power and Conflict anthology. So there's 15 poems in total, and this one could come up on your poem. So hopefully by the end of today's session, obviously as you go through school, you should understand the poem in a bit more detail. So for example, the language, the structure and the messages and so on. So we'll look at that at a later point. You will also today, or this session, have to look at a question like we did last week, and I will show you how to answer that at a later point. But just to get you thinking about the question is, how does a poet use language and structure to create a sense of power and control in this poem? So the question might give a little bit away about what the poem may be about. It might be about power, could be about control. So a little bit about Shelley. Born in 1792 and died in 1822. A radical and influential romantic poet. Okay, it does say romantic poet, but don't get confused romantic with love, romance. Okay, so the romantic era was a time of war, actually, with the French Revolution and a lot of political and social turmoil. So poets really wanted to kind of express their views and comment upon, as it says here, problems in society, to express his own views. Okay, he was born in England. He created lyric poems containing radical ideas about society, as I've just said. And how did he do it? He used a 14-line sonnet form, experimental with the rhyme scheme, and again we're looking at the iambic pentameter again as well. So just a bit of a recap in our knowledge, especially with the iambic pentameter. There's 3 terms here I want to look at and study. And I'd like to write down the meaning, just like we did last week, again here. So if you'd like to pause me now, and then afterwards I'll go through the terms and the meanings. So, romantic poetry, we should have put it originated in the 18th century. It was influenced by problems in society. So you get the idea that the problems in society were spoken about a lot through the use of poetry, art, and so on. Iambic pentameter often consists of 5 beats per line, and then we've got the theme. Okay, so we'll discuss what themes are apparent in this poem at a later point. A theme is an idea that is revisited. Okay, so moving on to our buzz talk, our discussion. It says you're about to read a poem written by 19th century English poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. It is titled Ozymandias. What do you think this poem could be about? So usually what we say to you to do is look at the title, but obviously I don't think we'll know much about Ozymandias. If you do, excellent, well done. And that is why this picture is being put here to help you. It says, look at the picture below. What ideas come to mind? Okay, the question asks us about power, doesn't it? What comes to mind here possibly about power? So if you'd like to pause me for however long you need, and then I'll go through what I think about this image afterwards, which is relatable to the poem Ozymandias. So, in this image you can clearly see there's a statue, or what once was a statue, a monument of someone obviously very important. If you can see here, you've got the head of the statue on the floor, and you've got the 2 legs obviously still in the ground. It shows it's been broken, it's been dismantled through whatever reason. You could argue that it could be nature. So it could be nature that's destroyed it, and this could possibly lead on to a theme that nature is more powerful than man. Or it could be maybe a rebellion, maybe people didn't like this person, this ruler that's clearly seen here. You can see the head, it looks like an Egyptian statue, so this could possibly have been a pharaoh at the time. So obviously pharaohs had a lot of power. Maybe he abused that power, and that's why this statue now is the way it is. Maybe he wasn't liked, maybe he abused his power in such a way where people obviously dismantled this statue. We've got the idea that possibly he's quite alone now. As you can see in this image, it's just him on his own, whereas if you're looking back at the time he ruled, he would have had a lot of people following him. He would have had a lot of people to order and maybe they didn't like this order, and that's again why possibly this statue is the way it is now, and no one's looked after it. The main thing possibly you could say from this is that power doesn't last forever. If you think about the amount of kings and queens in various different countries that they've been, pharaohs for example in this image, the power doesn't actually last forever, does it? Whereas nature, you could argue, does. It continues, and people over time forget about these people. So the only thing that's left of this person now is a statue in the desert, and that is basically what the poem is saying, that power and control, it doesn't last forever, and it leads you to the question I'll lead you on to at a later point. So from this you could say that power doesn't last forever, nature is more powerful than man. If you do have any other ideas from that, that's excellent, as long as you can back it up with the image, but that image is just to get you started and thinking about what this poem could be about. So Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the context of the poem. So we would have looked at context in poetry or novels before this year in English. Context is basically what was happening around the time. So as I said before, poets, romantic poets, will want to talk about turmoil in society or their political views. Okay, so what is going on around the time, and why was Shelley influenced to write this poem? Okay, so initially, Shelley was inspired to write Ozymandias due to the archaeological discoveries made in Egypt as a result of Napoleon's defeat of Egypt in the late 18th century. So we've got the idea at the time of this poem, the time it was written, there was a lot of war, invasion, loss of power, the gaining of power going on at the time. So he wanted to express that. He wrote the poem in a competition with his friend, funnily enough, after reading the engravement on the statue. So they had a bit of a competition with his friend, and he came up with this poem, which is a really good poem actually. And again, thinking about Shelley's personal beliefs, he had a real dislike for royalty and empires, and I think once we've read through this poem, you really understand why that is, and why he wants this this pharaoh Ozymandias, other known as Ramesses II, why he actually disliked empires. Basically, he thought that people in power kept the people that didn't have any power, the peasants, the lower classes, he kept them down, and they were looked down on, as it clearly suggests after I've read through this poem. So you've got this king who at the time had a lot of power, but as time has progressed, he has lost that power. So this week I'll read the poem out to you, okay, and then we'll have a look at some of the questions. Just take into consideration the themes, the messages, and if you can, as I'm reading through, think about some words or phrases really show that this person wasn't a nice ruler, a nice person that was in charge, looked after people of the lower class, as Shelley is trying to suggest. So, I met a traveller from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on sand half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor while those passions red which yet survive. Stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away. So initially, what do we think possibly this poem is about? As I've said before, it could be about a pharaoh that once had power and now doesn't. Okay, and that's the main message. If we look at the first question here, what do you think this poem is about? I think it's about someone that's had the power taken away from them by nature. Over time, people have forgotten about. Okay, so I'll go through a couple of words you might not understand, and then we'll look at a few more questions down here from the task that you need to do. So the word antique, I met a traveller from an antique land, it basically means old. We've got visage, which is basically someone's facial expression, or a person's face. Okay. We've also got pedestal. You may have heard the saying, put on a pedestal. A pedestal is basically the base of a statue. Usually it would have some form of writing on who the person was or what they've said, and through the example here it says, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. It's basically suggesting, if we're relating this to the question at the bottom, what the words on the foot of the statue suggest about the person who had them put there. Suggest that he was maybe quite arrogant. The King of Kings. Look on my works. So that his works will be his statues and what he's done for people in Egypt at the time. He was well known for his architecture. He would have had a lot of statues. Look on my works and despair. It's suggesting that he's boasting about what he's done. He's very arrogant, and he believes he's the best person living there. Okay. So we've got pedestal and colossal. You may have heard colossal before. Colossal is basically synonymous to huge, big, massive. Okay, it's a colossal wreck. It's huge, which possibly shows how big the statue was at the time. But now it's not a well, it is a statue still, but it has been ruined, possibly by nature. Okay. The two themes in the poem we could possibly suggest are time, how things change over time, and maybe how it is man versus nature, how nature maybe is more powerful and durable than man. Okay, so I'd like to look at the poem again, read through it yourselves. Obviously, if you'd like to annotate it with more annotations, you can. I've given you some meanings of words, okay, but think about which language, which lines, which phrases could we use to answer the question to show that control has been lost or won, or power has been lost or won. Nothing beside remains is an excellent quote to use. Colossal wreck, boundless and bare. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. These are really good. It's a really good poem to pick out relevant quotes for the question we're going to look at very shortly. Okay, so just like I did last week, we are going to look at a colour-coded response that I've done to help you, and I'll also give you some sentence starters and some words to look at as well. So just go over the question again. How does the poet use language and structure to create a sense of power and control in this poem? Okay, so you should aim to develop one developed comment about language and one about structure. So what I'm going to do is go on to something I've prepared earlier, and we're going to look at what you could do. So I've created some sentence starters here. Power and control is created through the poem as the line, and I've left this blank, obviously you can fill this in yourself, and then I've got suggest to the reader. Power is an attribute that comes and goes. So these three sentence starters you could use. I suggest you use one of them or two of them just to help you out if you are struggling. It will help improve your work and you'll feel a lot more confident afterwards. I've also got keywords. Hopefully you can use these as well. Power control, Ozymandias, Ramesses II, who is also known as a pharaoh leader in ancient Egyptian times. We've also got suggests, reinforces, and the phrase. So these keywords and sentence starters, if you are struggling, will really help you if you are stuck for ideas. So what I've done, as I've done previously for Shakespeare Sonnet 130, is I've created a what in the red, a how in the amber, and a why in the green. As you can see this week, I've also put in black a further analysis. It's your developed analysis. This will make your answer a lot better, and you'll possibly pick up more marks if you go into that further analysis, which I know you've been taught about this year across English. Okay, so before I get into that, I just need to stop the video quickly so I can go on to a different one, and I'll be explaining to you very shortly how to answer this question based on language and based on structure. So I'll see you shortly. Thank you.